Hi guys, again this is Professor Bryan Yves Araneta, and let's have a look at two large groups of plants that are able to extend their habitat into saline environments. We have the mangroves and the seagrasses. I'm creating this thread because I'm teaching aquatic botany, and there is a need to focus on aquatic plants to equip my marine biology and fishery students. Now, we know from our previous discussion and lessons, we know that plants, especially the flowering ones, they are more adapted into the terrestrial environment, or at least they tolerate fresh water better than seawater. So if there is a plant, or there are plants that are able to colonize the sea, including, of course, the obvious or facing the hazards of wave action, waterlogging, nutrient scarcity, including the presence of hostile interactions between other species, then there must be something special about these plants. And plants are also producers. That's why it's also interesting to look at mangroves, how mangroves and seagrasses can support an ecosystem. By the way, I forgot to mention that when we talk about mangroves or seagrasses, we can refer to the organisms themselves, we can refer to those plants, or we can refer to a community or an ecosystem. And it all depends on the context of our discussion. And again, for this thread, guys, I cannot complete all of this in one sitting. So first, subscribe to my channel and get notified with this thread. I do not upload regularly, but just subscribe to show your support. And sooner or later, I believe that I'll be able to finish or to complete all the series and threads that I started. Okay? Now, I'll give you some introductory descriptions or a sort of overview of mangroves and seagrasses. So let's start with mangroves. These are usually dicot plants, mostly trees. So you can refer to them as mangrove forest, like this one here in the Philippines. They are common in tropical areas. In one textbook that I read, their counterparts in temperate regions are your salt marshes, if that is correct. Again, you have these muddy shores, these intertidal areas with abundant production or growth. So you can imagine a barren shore. So you can't really miss a mangrove stand or a mangrove area. Because again, there are lots of trees in there, lots of patches of trees, canopies, and they are even considered to be equal to your tropical rainforest when it comes to production or productivity or the amount of biomass that are produced by all the organisms there per year. And all the inhabitants of your mangrove ecosystems are all well adapted to low oxygen levels in the water. Of course, there's low oxygen levels because there are lots of heterotrophs there. Okay, there's also fluctuating seawater levels, tidal action, okay, salinity fluctuations. So it may look peaceful or serene from afar, but again, it can be harsh out there. But still, again, these organisms, these plants, they still thrive. And here in the Philippines, there are about an estimated 256,185 hectares of mangrove forest. Again, 256,000 hectares. So if we have, let's say, 30 million hectares of land here in the Philippines, the mangrove areas or mangrove patches comprise about 0.85% of the total land area. Or shall we say, let's make it 1%. Okay, the area or the land area that is covered by mangroves. And if we look at the global proportions, Okay, I got an information here from Wikipedia. There is about 137,800 square kilometers. So that's square kilometers. You multiply that by 100 to get values or data in hectares. So there is about 13.8 million per hectare, or there is 13.8 million hectares globally, or the total mangrove cover of the entire planet. Okay, and Philippines contributes about 2% of that to the global mangrove ecosystem. Again, these are just bloated estimates, and we know that the trend is declining because, again, this data is in 2000. It's already 20 years since we have that data. Okay, but in perspective, try to think of it. The mangrove cover of the entire planet is only about twice or twice the size of the Philippines land area. Now, in a study of the economic value of mangroves in 2012 here by Salem, mangroves are valued at an average of $28,662, okay, per hectare per year. So that's about 1.1 million pesos per year. Now, I will not contest this because I feel that this is a decent estimate. Okay, this is in 2012, and I think it can even produce more if more efficient fisheries technologies are employed. And the Philippines therefore can get about 7.3 billion, okay, dollars. So that's in dollars. That's about 293 trillion pesos per year, for if we consider our total mangrove cover, and at an exchange rate of 40 pesos per dollar. So you can imagine that if it's not too good to be true, you can see the tremendous amount of resource that we have. Of course, that value perhaps include indirect services to other economic resources, but imagine our country's resources considering the mangroves alone. So we need to look again and improve our actual production rates in order to realize this asset. Okay, now let's go to your seagrasses. Now we have the dicots in your mangroves, and this time we have monocots. Monocots, grasses, because again, these are grasses. But of course, I don't mean to say that. Okay, they look like grasses, but they are not true grasses. I will discuss more of this when we have their biology. But like mangroves, you can also find them in intertidal areas, or even beyond that, up to the sublittoral zones, or what they call as subtidal areas, that is always covered with water. We know that since there is less fluctuation in water levels in these areas, we can say that these areas are more stable than the intertidal, or as we approach the estuarine habitats. Okay, now mangroves and seagrasses, every time you found them in these areas, they actually stabilize the sediment or the substrate. Okay, and there is what we call as seagrass meadow or seagrass bed. So if there is a thing called a mangrove forest, we also have a seagrass meadow or seagrass bed. And this is also where a variety of organisms can thrive. And seagrasses can be found in many parts of the world, unlike the mangroves, which are only limited near the equator. Seagrasses, of course, need enough sunlight and oxygen. So most probably you cannot find them in dimly lit places or in polluted environments. Okay. Now, what's the need for oxygen, by the way, when plants also produce them? And we know that plants also take in carbon dioxide. Of course, if you look at the whole picture, polluted environments, as I have mentioned a while ago, or shall we say those environments with high organic content, you expect that there are lots of heterotrophs out there, okay? Especially your microbes, microbial heterotrophs. And they can easily compete with your seagrasses in terms of oxygen use. Because again, seagrasses actually produce oxygen for themselves, not for other organisms. So again, if you have lots of competition there for oxygen, that can reduce the oxygen in the sediments or in the water. So if you have less oxygen, there's less oxygen to use in aerobic respiration. That's decreased metabolism and of course decreased production. Of course, your heterotrophs can produce carbon dioxide too, and they can make the water acidic. And it will also be hard for seagrasses to take in minerals. Okay? Now, I googled here also the area covered by seagrasses. Okay, and in the Philippines, there is about 27,282 square kilometers. That's about 2.7 million hectares. Okay, so it's way more than the area that we just calculated for your mangroves a while ago. Because the mangrove forest is about only 0.25 million hectares. Again, your seagrasses, it's 2.7 million. Now, how do we account for that? So I hope that this is an accurate approximate, because the global estimate is about 500 square kilometers. So we can convert that to hectares. That's roughly 50 million hectares. So the Philippine area, or the seagrasses cover, or the seagrass cover here in the Philippines, is about 5% of the total global or total seagrass cover around the world. And this supposedly translates to 19K $19,000 of production per hectare. And of course, if you convert that, that's a stunning $51 billion or 2 trillion pesos per year. Okay? Now you might ask, where did all this value go? Okay? So that will be the question that we'll be answering in the next parts or the continuation of the series. And I think that's enough for now. I'll do my best to get back to you so we can continue discussing these organisms, okay, and these ecosystems as well. So thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like my videos if you want more of this series. Thank you very much for watching.